Yo, what's up YouTube? Back in the garage. Today we got the bumper back on the Rx8 because the front end's about to get an overhaul. As you can see, there's a bunch of things I need to get done on my list here, but today we're gonna be making a bash bar. I want a bumper that extends out to the sides, protects one, my oil cooler, and two, the whole side of the car here. I wanna go ahead and get this done because we can't do a lot of things until I have my radiator placement. And the big thing is I have enough space to cram my radiator in right behind this radiator support, and it's not a lot of space. So what I'm gonna do is cut out this radiator support and basically mount my radiator on my bash bar, which will be quite a bit forward compared to where the radiator is. So I'd like to go ahead and get this cut out and get my bash bar in, that way I can mount the radiator and see how much space I have, because I have some other parts that need to go in the engine bay, and I can't really get the engine together until all that's in. So that's what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna go ahead and cut up my front end, make a bash bar. So what we have here is DOM tubing. Lake was able to order this through his work and we got a pretty good price on it. So whenever you're doing stuff like bash bars or reinforcements on frames, you don't want to be using pipe. You want to be using DOM tubing, which is a structural tubing. The mechanical properties are a lot higher, like yield strength and tensile strength. It's just built to be structural. So that's what I'm going to be using. We got 3 of these, so we're going to be using one on the Rx8 and then using one for Lake Celica for his bash bar over his intercooler. Now, to bend the tubing, if I were doing something with really sharp angles, you'd want to get an actual tube bender, and those things are pretty expensive. So what I have here is a pipe bender. For something with slight angles, such as this angle here that I'm going to bend, this will do just fine. Now, you have to be careful because the dies are meant for pipe sizing, and these are obvious. This is obviously tube, so the size is different.
So the key is just to be very careful not to kink the tube. And I had already done a few test scraps and got the angle that I need, and was basically using that as a template. And also that kind of proved to me that this thing could bend it no problem.
All right, guys, so I have my bend started, and what I'm doing is just constantly inspecting this as I'm increasing the bend. And I've also made a few marks, that way I know how my pipe is laying, or how my tube is laying, and that way I can always get it back to the same spot if I take it out to inspect it. I have blocks on each side to keep this thing level. So what I'm doing to inspect it is, 1, taking it out once in a while, and 2, just making sure that this isn't flattening in here. And from what I can tell, nothing is yet, but I'm not quite to the angle I need.
So there's a couple different ways people prevent these tubes from kinking using a pipe bender. 1 is filling them with sand. 2 would be clamping the tube to the die. And then basically what I did, I took the closest die that was slightly smaller than the tube, grinded down the edges just for a tight fit. And really what that did was just fully support the tube on both sides and keep it from flattening.
All right, so I have 2 even bends. That piece is done. Now I'm gonna make the plates that'll bolt onto the frame rail, and then that way all I need to do is make my little extension pieces and cut a saddle in them, and I'll be able to weld it up. All right, guys, here's how I have it mocked up. I have my plates made, and they're bolted in, and I have this bar set up just at the height I want it. And I was looking at it, and I think I'm gonna make 2 more bends. So I kind of want this to stick out as far out towards the front of the headlight as it can get. And right now it's in front of the plastic, so I think it's good where it's at. What I'm gonna need to do so that I can still fit the bumper is bend, with this being my center, bend this end into that point. So this end needs to go in about 3 inches. It'll give it a nice round, kind of to the contour of this bumper here. It'll bend again right there and go into the end. So that's what I'm gonna do here.
So now that I already figured this out once, it was much quicker to do it the second time. The hardest part was just making sure that I could replicate 2 bends and make them identical. So I made myself a little template to help. And the other big part is making sure this thing is sitting level whenever you're bending it. That way your bends aren't twisted compared to one another. So that was pretty tricky, but we got it figured out and got some nice bends.
Here is, I think, what I'm going with. This should be enough to clear the bumper. If I need to chop a little bit more off the side, that'll be okay. It won't necessarily protect the headlight unless I bump it out a little bit, but I don't think I'm as much worried about that. But right now I think it'll fit underneath the bumper. Everything's even and centered. So now what I'll do, I'll get some measurements for my extension pieces here, and I will go ahead and start laying them out. So while the bash bar is in the position I want it, I went ahead and got my measurement for my extension here. Basically, I'm going to grind a saddle into it. You could do this with a hole saw, but because I have basically my measurements at 4 points around the end of the extension, I'm going to just grind those points down. If there's a little bit of a gap, obviously I'm going to try to minimize gap, but if there's a little bit of a gap, I think I can fill it fine with a weld. So that's what I'm gonna do. Go ahead and cut one of these and make sure it's gonna fit right, and then I'll cut the other one.
So not the quickest way to do this. Like I said, you could set up a jig and cut it with a hole saw. I've actually cut similar saddles before, so I knew kind of the best way to do it and knew what I was looking for. So I just did it quick with a grinder instead of setting anything up, and I think it came out pretty good.
All right, so hopefully you can kind of imagine what I did here. So it'd be basically equivalent to setting this thing at an angle and running a hole saw through it. So you can see it's about a perfect circle running through there. Should give me a pretty tight fit, and it should be about the correct angle. All right, so I have both pieces cut. There's the final grind out piece, square at the other end, and I have this held in with a magnet. So I basically have it square to this plate, and you can see the whole way around is pretty tight. So my little experiment worked by eyeballing it just about perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack this up. I'll do the final welding out or off of the car, but I'm gonna go ahead and tack it up both sides and go from there. All right, it's tacked up. Give a nice look at it from back here. Oh yeah, nice. So I will weld this thing up tomorrow. Tonight, I'm gonna go ahead and cut out this radiator support. So the other big reason to cut out this radiator support is it actually blocks the airflow to the radiator. Because of the way the radiator mounts from factory, it doesn't block it whenever it's at an angle like that, but whenever you put the radiator upright, it actually covers like over half of it. So getting rid of it will basically give me full airflow to the radiator, which will be good. Well, I had to do it. I had to put the bash bar back on one more time just to take a look at it, but man, look how much room I have now. Just got to sort out the whole wiring situation. Most of this fat loom is gonna be gone, so I'll be able to clear out a lot of those wires and hopefully reroute them. But all I got to do is lop off this end to match it with that end and weld her up, and that'll be it. That's enough for tonight though, so I'm gonna call that good. I'm gonna call the Rx8 chopped, and I'll see you guys later.